Sensationally silver, because you are.
Welcome, everyone, to Sensationally Silver, A State of Mind, conversations with extraordinary, ordinary persons of age, people who are going to bring you information, inspiration, and validation. Join us. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Sensationally Silver, A State of Mind, conversations with extraordinary, ordinary persons of age. My guest today has been a frequent guest on Sensationally Silver. She's one of my favorite people in the whole world, Julia Loggins. And usually, Julia and I talk about health issues, gut issues, ways to deal with pain that aren't involving medicine as such. But today we're on a very, very different wavelength, okay? And I'm talking to you first because I want you to know how this particular program came about. So Julia is one of the team that helped me stay healthy. I have some challenges health-wise, and she's one of this wonderful team that keep me as on track as possible. So I'm lying on her table one day, and I'm talking about my grandchild who has decided to no longer go by the name I gave that grandchild and has changed it to Wesley. And I said to Julia, well, I'm just going to keep on calling her Summer Ann. And Julia said to me, no, you can't do that. That's over. That person doesn't exist anymore. And I knew that Julia had dealt with gender issues with a child of hers. And I don't know how else to say it, Julia changed my mind. I was sort of sticking to my position because I'm old. The grammar sounds terrible to my ear, and I just don't have to change. But Julia helped me to see how disrespectful that position was. So today, she and I are going to talk about gender issues for parents and grandparents. I'm talking about a grandchild. Julia's talking about a child. She had her children later in life. I had mine very early. So grandparents are parents, but it's an issue. And it's one that a lot of us never saw coming. Right, Julia?
Right, exactly. It's true. So many of us have non-binary children and grandchildren, which is meaning they they're not identifying as heterosexual straight, they're identifying as non-binary. So that is a spectrum of gender. And they may be trans, like my child, my son, and your grandson, Wesley, my child, Lou, who is a trans man. And we are learning about what it means to be an ally and a support system to a very vulnerable, beautiful, exquisite world of people that we happen to love and are related to, and who need us as a support system. And maybe not even as I'm learning to understand everything, but to accept and support and learn what that means, because we're all on a journey together of, and for me, it has been just an enormous opening of thought and feeling led by my overwhelming unconditional love for my child.
And it's challenging because we're used to seeing this person a different way. At least it's been challenging for me. I kind of wanted to pretend to myself that it was a fad. In fact, I won't even call it pretending. I kind of believe that. I've watched this person go in and out of a lot of different stages that have been kind of unusual. And I thought, okay, just another stage. But one of the things you told me, Julia, is that for your child, a lot of those sort of mental health issues just dropped away when he was able to be who he is. Yeah.
Exactly. Gender, being non-binary, being trans is not a trend. It's not a phase. It is who our child is. It is not, it is something they have put probably years of time into thinking about, into wrestling with for themselves, let alone for sharing with us and the world. It is, it is who they are. It was not a decision they made. The decision may involve who they share it with, how honest they are. But both you and I know that secrets destroy lives. They destroy the lives of trans and non-binary children and adults every day, and families who don't understand what happened when they lose someone dear. That, and you and I are here to talk to our community about being a support, even answering questions, because I had an amazing conversation with my son, with Lou, who I got to ask all kinds of questions to, the kind that you are bringing up today, to hear what their answers might be so that I might share as best I could, not as any expert, just as a mom and as you as a grandma. We're not more than that, but that's enough. It's enough in this moment. And there's amazing organizations that are expert, like Real Mama Bears and Glad, where they have expert, information and questions. But my child answered all kinds of questions that people might ask today with so much generosity and so much grace, which just touched me about the amount of work they have done on themselves in their own journey and the courage it's taken them. They're just the most courageous person I know.
I know that when I bring this up with people in conversation, I often get the response, how come this is happening now? This never happened before. And I'm suspecting that there are some choices that are now in the forefront of our consciousness that didn't ever seem to be choices before. If you didn't identify with what your body looked like, there wasn't any kind of answer some years back. It was like, what is this?
Yeah, it's so true. I asked you that question on our call. I said, people say, "Oh, is it like, how come this is happening now?" And they said, well, Mom, what you can say is that we, a younger generation, are standing on the shoulders of the work that has been done before us to open doors. Sometimes I read the news and I wonder about that. I read heartbreaking things, laws that are being made that make it very difficult in places to be out, to be queer, non-binary, trans. But also, I do see younger people coming out and being themselves, being who they are, finding sources, finding gender affirming surgery, finding doctors, finding therapists, finding allies. And so I do know that the work, like Robin, the work you did, writing the first book for women about empowerment, you started it. You really wrote with, Women Who Love Too Much. You really brought a conversation that women have been wrestling with for generations, hundreds of years, out into the open. And because of people like you, and especially women like our kids and our grandkids have a shot at being themselves. I heard a medical doctor from England, a woman, speak this morning, and she said, what if when our kids were born, instead of labeling them, we just said, see who you are, see who you want to be. Why do they have to have a box that they fit into? That's something we were taught and conditioned. That's really not how it works in the natural world. So, what if we open up our minds? And to me, I've done to want to be a better parent and a better human. Now I feel like I've done a lot of work on that question. And what if we just take away those labels? God knows they haven't done you and I any good.
I had this conversation with Wesley after they performed in a play, did a beautiful job. We're standing outside, and I talked to them about wanting to do this podcast on this subject. And I said, is it okay with you if I talk about it at a personal level? And they were so, I mean, the grin was so big and so sweet. And
Oh,
just, yes, yes, I think it's great. And their mother said, I, Nana, that's me, has a easier time with the they and the them than I do. And I said to Wesley, that's because I've been around Julia. She's so good at it. It's very confusing to me. It sort of breaks rules in my head to use they and them. It feels so grammatically incorrect. But for me now, being respectful is more important than being grammatically correct. So if until some language evolves that works better for my ear, and maybe it never will, I'm so willing to go along with this because that smile and that there was a big thank you. Thank you for talking about this. It's really important. And
well, for acknowledging their identity, your grandchild's identity, for you to acknowledge that and accept that and their name. And some parents are really triggered by that, like I gave you that name, so that should be your name. But that's also a conditioning that we've all been taught, that somehow what we think about who our child is, including the name we gave them, has anything to do with who they really are. And if we can just hold that more lightly, as instead of as something that they're doing disrespectful to us. That's how some parents obviously are triggered by it, that somehow we're being rejected. And sometimes we are. It's all part of the journey. As we're growing, as our kids and grandchildren are becoming themselves, there's all these parts of it that are messy. And so, we have to be gentle with ourselves and not take things personally if we're doing our best, and ask questions. And maybe we will get an answer and maybe we won't, but maybe the reason we won't get an answer is our child or grandchild isn't comfortable sharing it at that moment, isn't ready to share it. Okay, we can accept that.
not have the answer yet. When I think of all
They
the
may
questions
not.
I've had that have taken decades for me to find the answers to, these things grow on us slowly. We're
Is
not
it
born
exact?
with all this great understanding, especially if we, I mean, I'm 80 years of being in this system that says it's this way or this way. And
That's right.
certainly it started to change with AIDS, bringing being gay out of the closet.
Yes.
We had to start
Right?
looking at things we were just not looking at before that. But what an opening, what a freedom that brought, and what
Yes.
an elevation in consciousness. And now it's going further.
Yes.
We need to go further unless we want to get
We
left
have-
behind. When when I was able to have this conversation with Wesley, and ever since, I have to try to describe what it's been like for me, because there was
ah,
a tightness in me. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stay the way I am. And it just has melted away.
oh,
Oh, lovely to
I know,
soften.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't have to hold a position and say, this is who I have to be with you. I don't have to do that. I can
Mm.
open up and say, okay, help me to understand better. And that's what I got so strongly from Wesley is the gratitude for trying and the
Mm,
acceptance of being clumsy at it. How lovely.
yeah. And I think one of the things that comes up is pronouns. You mentioned that. That's one of the most triggering things for any older generation is the pronouns. And I think it's important for parents and grandparents to ask, what pronoun would you like? The truth is, for younger people, this is just how they live now. Whether they are straight, non-binary, trans, it doesn't matter. They ask each other, what pronoun would you like me to use? It is just part of the conversation. It isn't how you and I grew up. We were not given any choices. We fought for the few choices we had. Now there's more choices, but there's more questions. So a question to a child is, what name would you like me to call you? What is the pronoun you'd like to be addressed by? Um, what else would you like me to know about who you are? Um, is there something you would like me to change? I think that's also part of this that's so triggering for parents and grandparents, is that how we parented and grandparented our child, we feel is all up for grabs. And in some ways it is, and that's actually okay. However, it's important to know that nothing we did or didn't do, quote unquote, caused this. Our child is this person. We may have still done things that hurt them, that made them feel unsafe, that caused them pain, that we, if we're lucky enough, will learn about from them, from our own work on ourselves. But this is who they are authentically. This is their authentic self. And if we are a safe enough space to be in with them, then we will get to meet an amazing human, much more of a human than ever, because this is all of who they are. And if we give them that space, you know, they will keep getting bigger in the world. And look at our world. We need them. I think that's actually one of the reasons why trans and non-binary people are so triggering, because they didn't ask to be world changers. They just asked to be themselves. They didn't ask to each come with some job to either educate us or change the world, but their being does.
It's like requiring everyone to get a different prescription for their glasses. You got to see things differently because the way you've been focusing doesn't work across the board anymore.
And look at our world, it doesn't work.
Well, yeah. I can't, because I do this. I always take everything back to my understanding of alcoholism because that's where my expertise is. And it's the same thing. Parents so often think, what did I do wrong that this person that I raised is an alcoholic? But we know that that isn't what causes alcoholism. People can come from horrific backgrounds and not be alcoholic. People can come from ideal backgrounds and have that disease. It's not a product of how someone was raised. They say you can't cause it, you can't control it, you can't cure it. And that same attitude needs to apply to this. It's not anybody's fault. It's something that emerges. And we either go, nope, not having any part of it, or okay, I accept that. I'm going to do my very best with it.
Yeah. And that it is, to me, it's a blessing of evolution, of that, there have always been queer, trans, and non-binary people, always. My grandfather's brother was gay, he was a screenwriter. It goes back to the time. There have always been people who lived outside of being straight. Are you a woman or are you a man? There have been always a spectrum, but they weren't safe. The amount of pain, suffering, suicide is still today. The amount of suicide for trans and non-binary kids and young people is extraordinarily high, which is why being an ally to our child, or, it's so important, because kids are at risk and their friends are at risk. They're, I know when Lou lived in Texas, I was just worried about them all the time. And right now in Kansas, a trans person can't get a driver's license. it's unfathomable to me that this exists in our world. But that is how triggering change is. That's how triggering authenticity is. And like I said, our kids and grandkids didn't ask for this. They didn't ask to be world changers. And some of them that may be part of what they feel drawn to. But most of our kids just want to live, to find joy, to be safe, to fall in love.
I'm going to tell a little story from way back when I was a therapist. I was in some training on incest, and this was not something that was talked about much. This was a long time ago. And so it was a weekend long with Susan Forward, excellent training. And when I went back to my job, during the next week, I had 3 people tell me that they were incest victims. Now, they had been incest victims long before I ever met them, but they didn't feel safe to tell me that. I didn't go in and announce that I had had this training in incest survivors, whatever. I didn't talk about it, but somehow the fact that I was now safe to tell that to came across. I mean, in some magical way, those 3 people were safe enough, feeling safe enough to tell me that. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because maybe for somebody who's watching or listening today, they feel strongly enough that they want to be in the corner of their grandchild, no matter what that sexual identity looks like, sounds like, whatever. And when that happens, they're going to become a person that's safe for that younger person to talk to and to confide in. And they might be, for a while at least, the only one in that person's corner, the only one there.
Right.
But we all, we don't need thousands and thousands of people on our side, but we all need one, at least just one. So that's one of the motivations I had for doing this program with Julia, because we all want somebody in our corner. We want somebody to say, I understand. And even if we don't have to say it out loud, we communicate, I accept this. I accept you. It's fine with me.
I accept you. You're safe with me. Like you said, to just, for everybody, and I'm always looking inside and doing this work, like how can I make myself safer? And it seems like, I mean, the first thing we all look at ourselves and go, well, of course I am. Well, what were what are my hidden prejudices? Things that I was just raised to believe that I don't realize are so damaging. They're so limiting, and they're also giving off that vibe, as you said, that makes me a less safe, less trustworthy person. Do I not feel like, you know, am I willing to be a student again? At our age, there's that part of us that feels like, do you mean you're going to throw up how the world works now in my face? Just as I'm trying to figure out how to learn my computer, now I have to relearn everything about gender and sexuality. And what you and I mean, I feel like what this podcast is all about is the fact that at this moment in our lives it's such a gift to have the opportunity. And I asked my child, and by the way, I did get Lou's permission to do this podcast. I said to them, as your mom, when I look at pictures of you as a child, and my heart just opens. Is that okay? Does that feel like I'm betraying who you are now to love who you were? And they said, no, you're my mom. So we're loving all of our, you and I are parents and grandparents. Strangers don't wrestle with that around our kids. But we have all these big questions to answer of ourselves, to ask. And the truth is, as Lou was sharing with me, in the beginning of a person's transition or opening up to being queer, maybe they would be less comfortable with how I felt about them as a child because maybe they feel like they'd like to erase that whole part of their life. And, it would be my work on myself not to take that personally. I mean, uh, to just let them, to just hold space for them while they go through that, to just not get in their way with my issues around it, to just deal with those myself.
Julia, that thing of looking at the pictures or whatever from that person's childhood, I know that's true for me when I see this little girl in her little fluffy clothes.
Yeah.
I'm going, oh, and to be given permission, what you're saying is you were given permission to just adore that little person and not be
Yes.
betraying the emerging identity that has happened so that the sexual identification doesn't apply anymore, but loving that person stays the same. These things stretch us. They require a lot of us. It's like I saw the world this way, and now you're asking me to really stretch. Yep, yep. And that's one of the gifts of getting older, in my opinion, is don't stop being willing to stretch and broaden and open to things. Because if we get rigid in every way, physically, emotionally, mentally, we just freeze. And freezing doesn't do anybody any good. Not us, not the people around us. We need to stay flexible on every
Yeah.
level. And and we're going to be challenged. That's the way life is these days. We're being
And if you
challenged.
challenge, and if you're afraid of making a mistake with a pronoun and you've never done it before, you'll make a mistake. I mean, I made a million of them, um, and so it's become more comfortable for like more of just part of my vernacular to just, speak to them, or even just the idea of pronouns in general. But if this is a whole new conversation, it's going to be clumsy. And if you just say, I'm going to do my best, and you're welcome to correct me. And I'm not going to take that personally. Just the way I want to be corrected, just the way we want to be corrected when we're learning any new thing. We don't need somebody to coddle us about it. We just want to be corrected and move on. And that's what we're doing. And be and just allow that this is an amazing opportunity. And for so many people out there, you may have a grandchild or a child that um, has come out, is coming out, would like to, hasn't told you. And if just this conversation opens the door a little bit, our kids need us. Affirming families are life-saving.
That feels like it should be on a poster. Affirming families are life saving.
Well, it's not mine. It's from Mama Bears. I stole it from one of their beautiful posts on social media. And Real Mama Bears is a wonderful group of Mama Bears that include Papa Bears and every other kind of a bear, um, that put their arms around and are very vocal advocates for trans and non-binary kids and young adults. And the truth is, people are coming out of all ages. I have a really close friend who has been gay for their whole life, and they just came out to themselves, really, or to the world as trans, and even did gender affirming surgery, which is another conversation that people may have questions about, but they did that at age 55. So what's happening is younger people like our kids and grandkids are giving permission to people closer to our age to be who they never got to be. And you and I are getting an opportunity to be people we've never gotten to be, to really look at all the decisions we made and the beliefs, things we were taught, and kind of take them apart before we um, become angels.
I think it's important to just acknowledge that it's okay to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, right. It's part of it.
Yeah, it's part of the process. Be okay with, I don't know how to do this, or I'm accepting it part way, but not the whole way. And to ask for
Yeah.
help. I think it's kind of like when you go to a foreign country and you may be just awful at it, but you try to speak their language. People appreciate the effort, even though you're really not very good
Yeah.
at it. You're sincere in your effort. You want to be able to communicate, and they'll more than meet you halfway. I think this is probably another example of that kind of thing. Just the desire to be
Yeah. The
what
desire.
they need us to be. They want us to be. They hope that we can be for them.
And the discomfort is us looking at the mirror. That's really all the discomfort is. The discomfort is looking in the mirror and discovering we are way more limited, closed-minded, conditioned, fearful, scared, and stuck than we thought we were. And that is a lot for anyone to swallow. And to say, wow, I have a lot more learning to do, and I have a lot of unlearning to do. And that's the confrontational piece. So the discomfort is always about the mirror. It's not about our child or grandchild. It's about us. And like you said, if we can just sit with our own discomfort, which isn't their job to fix, although, um, I will say Lou has been unbelievably um, patient with me and very open and acknowledging really of the messiness of the journey. And I feel that it's just inspired me to discover things that, a lot of painful things about myself that I didn't imagine for someone, and to think that anything could be triggering in the world of authenticity. It's like, really? And yet here we are, right? To go, wow, I'm a beginner and I have so much work to do on myself. And I have all these conditional beliefs. And yeah, I passed them on just by being them, just by the choices I made that were made out of fear and the way I, did things. And so th we get this opportunity to go back and look at that.
One of the things that I think you're describing, and I certainly encountered with Wesley, is this just beautiful generosity in terms of acceptance of my clumsiness and my awkwardness and my groping to find my way with this. And I also know when I was in graduate school, the women's movement was really beginning to get some traction. And we who were emerging from this apron wearing, cake baking kind of identity, which I never had and my mother never had, but still, I mean, it was so strong. It was what you were supposed to want to be. As we were emerging from that, we so badly needed one another's support. And that's really what we're talking about today, is the opportunity to offer support to someone who is in a revolutionary place, which also means a fragile place and sometimes means a dangerous place. To offer that support and that love and that willingness
Yeah.
to open up. And so that's our message today, I think, right, Julia? That's what we're trying to invite people to do. If they're willing, don't do anything you don't want to do. This isn't coercive. This is
Exactly.
just an invitation, just an invitation. You might want to look at this. You might want
Yeah.
to think about this. You might want to ask about this. And I,
Yeah.
I think, I think I can say this is ongoing. I think I can say that I'm grateful for this opportunity because I didn't know how frozen I was in my belief system. Granted, I grew up with it. Granted, I've been living with it for decades and decades, and I was missing something. So, anyway, we can't cover it all, but
And that we're going to share some organizations if people want true an, true expert at either advice, or if they have more questions about things that they'd like answered by people that are leading, whether they're counselors, medical doctors, all amazing allies of the trans, non-binary, queer community, LGBTQ plus community, Real Mama Bears, GLAD. There's some amazing organizations out there. And if there's more questions you have, and maybe as an audience, if you have questions and you want to send them on to all the places that you can find Robin, we would be thrilled to answer them. And please, don't be ashamed of anything. There's no dumb question. Um, because it's all in the spirit of becoming a supportive ally and overcoming our own conditioning.
And limiting beliefs. Yeah.
Our own limiting belief systems are about who we are and what the world looks like and what people are like and what the people that we birthed are supposed to be. Like, this is about blowing that up and letting our kids and grandkids be who they have always been.
I'm tempted to end with this, Julia. I do tarot cards, and
Yes.
the last card in the deck is the world card, and it's always a picture of the dancing hermaphrodite, which in a way is saying everything now is included. When you get to the ultimate, because it's the best luck tarot card there is,
Yes.
everything is included. And so we're just on a journey toward ever increasing inclusiveness, hopefully.
It's a beautiful place to end. Thank you.
Julia, thank you. And thanks to all of you who have joined us today. We will see you next time.
And thank you to Lou and to Wesley, who gave us permission to speak about them and who have changed Robin and I forever.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. And thank you all. Bye now.
Bye.
Sensationally